Okay, so the next thing I want to do is give you a little advice if you're a campus minister or you're a fraternity and sorority guy and girl and you're thinking about doing an event to really share the gospel with my fraternity or my sorority or a campus wide event. And I'll talk about the pros and cons of both. I was the director, I was a student for 4 years, then a staff guy at Auburn for 4 years. Then I was the director of crew for 20 years at Ole Miss, and then now more of a traveling consultant in Greek ministry. And there was kind of this pressure over the years at times to do these big campus wide events. But then they would get kind of frustrating for a campus minister like myself because you'd raise this money, you'd do all this time and prep and your students, and you really wouldn't see a whole lot happen for your local ministry. Your local movement or ministry doesn't usually grow a whole lot from these big campus wide events. But here's why they're good: because of unity. They bring unity. We've done events where we've done things with the BSU, with FCA, with all types of different ministries where we come together and we host events. And we'll bring in a speaker that'll share the gospel. One of the events that we have done recently over the last, we've done it several times, is having Joe White with After Dark. He's come in, I think actually 4 times, about every 3 years at Ole Miss, and it's great. Now, do we see much of a difference at our weekly meeting and our local ministry? I'd say where you see a difference is there are going to be people that come to know Christ, and you're going to see your students take a step of faith to do these big events. But remember, if you're in a fraternity and sorority, your goal is not so much the campus, although that's great to do campus-wide events. I even did youth ministry while I was at Arkansas. But by my beginning of my senior year, I really realized I needed to really be focusing where God had me, and that's in my fraternity. So I'm going to talk about some things you can do in your fraternity. Now, a couple things you can do fraternity-wide that we've done. One is the wild game luncheons or the wild game dinners. I think they're very successful, are just a great way to get lost guys out to your house. Talk about a guys then a girl event. The guys. So what we've done at Ole Miss a couple times, and I know they've been successful at Auburn and some other schools, is you bring in a speaker like Jeff Struker, who we brought in which is a captain in the military. Captain Jeff Struker, he's amazing, and he does a great job keeping the men's attention and sharing the gospel. We tell men to bring a bunch of food, but I usually navigate a bunch of men anyway. We cook a bunch of wild game, and then we'll usually give away a shotgun because we want guys to fill out a comment card because we want to follow them up and answer questions that they have about the gospel. We had a guy come to know Christ when we did the Jeff Struker wild game lunch or dinner several years ago. I suggest maybe doing it on a Saturday of an off weekend or on a football weekend, but a Sunday right after church, maybe around 12 or 1. And then hosting it at a big fraternity. We've done that at like the Sigma Nu House, the Kappa Sig House, different places, ATO House. It's just a great way to reach a lot of frat guys. For the girls, an opportunity that we'll be talking about on our materials part of our web page is Marion Jordan. We have had huge response on her. She's come to Ole Miss now 2 or 3 times, and the girls love her. We've gotten where we'll have a weekly meeting night where our weekly meeting for the girls, they'll have a women's night. Mary and Jordan will come and speak on women's issues, and then we'll have a men's event over at another venue, and then we'll speak on manhood or something like that. So we end up having basically 2 weekly meetings in one night, and it's been really successful. Like I said, feel free to email me, campus ministers, if you've got questions about that. I'd love to help you. But let me just talk about some fraternity-wide events, some fraternity events just with you in your frat house, okay? Let's say you're a Sigma Nu and you want to see the Lord work in your house. A couple things you can do. When I was at Auburn, we invited the KDs. What we did was we had 2 or 3 Sigma Chi's and 2 or 3 KDs to get together one day and really study on apologetics. Like, how could a loving God send anybody to hell? What about the problem of evil? Can good people go to heaven? What about coexist in these different religions? And then we had a dessert where we invited the KDs over to the Sigma Chi house, and they could ask any question they wanted, and I emceed it, and I would repeat their question and let one of the panel, which were some disciples of mine in Sigma Chi and some of our stud KD girls, and they would answer the questions. And I'll never forget, after that, a guy named Greg Linton came up to me and he said, "Man, Isaac, I transferred in from Samford. He goes, I don't even know if I am a Christian. I'd love to sit down and talk with you. We got together the next day. He ends up giving his life to Christ. And we became great friends while he was in college and even after. It was just cool how the Lord used that event for sure to bring that one guy to him. Another thing that I've done before is stand up at chapter and announce the active study and say, hey, we're going to do a topic for the next 4 or 5 weeks. Sometimes Simachai this past spring at Ole Miss, they paired up with Kyo and they did a topic for 5 or 6 weeks with just Kyo, just to help bring new guys into the study. And then some of the things we'll do too is, we did the apologetics panel. We'll say, like I did, if you watch my 2 Timothy 2:2 video on this website about the Simachai house at Arkansas, I stood up at dinner one night and I just said, hey, it's Halloween tonight. We're going to do our weekly Bible study, and we're just going to talk about the reality of the evil stuff that goes on Halloween, the demonic stuff. And I got some crazy pamphlet I'd gotten from a Christian bookstore, and I don't even know if half of it was true. Probably wouldn't do it like I did that time, but you know what? Bill Cobb came to that study, and Bill Cobb heard the gospel, and it really shook him up to think about the spiritual world out there. And the next week he comes to my room, and my little fraternity brother, Mark Jones, leads him to Christ. So that came about as a result of that one kind of interesting, different Bible study. Okay, so another thing, I believe one campus, possibly Florida State, kind of almost started their movement a few years doing this, is they did a 4-week, 4-house outreach where they invited maybe, the KDs and the Kyos and the Sigma Nus and the Phi Delts, invited them all together, had several giveaways, had comment cards for you to fill out, and then a couple would speak on dating. Now, I think that's really a great idea, and it's just a good way to get exposure to you guys and what you're doing, and that when you're out on the campus, whether in Florida it's called Doulos or Greek-wide and some of the Texas campuses, it just gives you guys exposure to that, hey, we're here, we care about you guys, and we want to follow you up and sit down and visit with you if you've got questions. And let me say this, sharing the gospel one-on-one is far the most effective way to lead people to Christ, because when it's in a big group, like when you're speaking to a pledge class or those co-ed studies, it's great, but for some reason I notice a lot of times the freshmen don't really understand what I'm saying when I'm explaining the gospel. But when I sit down with somebody one-on-one and I'm listening to them and I'm sharing with them and we're looking at scriptures, I can really tell they really engage with me well. So I think everything you do, you need to be thinking about, how can I follow people up and meet with them one-on-one? How can I train my disciples to do the same, so that we're turning these big events into really one-on-one appointments? Because that's where usually you're going to see life change. Look at my list. Okay, one other co-ed study we've done in the spring is, what about a spring crawfish boil? And we've done it at the KA house before, and you invite all your different Greek chapters and your Bible studies together and invite them to bring friends. And then while everybody's eating crawfish, we do maybe a couple of giveaways, and then Meg and I did a dating talk or a marriage talk. Those are great things. In my Leaving a Legacy book, I've got those talks at the end of the book. But like I said, if you ever want any of this stuff, email me and I'll get it for you. So anyway, I hope that's some stuff that'll help you think. The big stuff is great, but always be thinking, how can I get the big things to the smaller events and then ultimately one-on-one, because that's where you're going to see life change. I hope it goes well for you.